The story begins in an emergency room. Doctors were working hard to save a certain patient who was struggling to breathe. The patient's name was Jan Lan, a mechanical engineer. Due to overwork, his heart suffered a stroke, and now he was close to death. Right after his birth, his parents died in a car accident, leaving him an orphan. After graduating, he spent 20 years in a company, living a nightmare with an extremely low salary. To make matters worse, he remained single his entire life and never held a girl's hand. In his youth, he focused all his time on work, striving to achieve success and raise his status. As an orphan, he wanted a good job, to save money, and to buy a house before finding a wife and building a family. But in the end, none of his plans came to fruition. He wasted his entire youth in a job that didn't value his effort. In truth, he felt somewhat relieved, finally about to escape the hell that had been his life, a life without purpose. Despite the doctor's efforts to save him, he wished they would let him go. He felt so tired and just wanted to rest. These were the last thoughts of the mechanical engineer Jan Lan. The scene shifts and shows an extremely luxurious mansion, where a certain young master wakes up from his sleep, confused. The young lord wonders if he is in a hospital, and how much a luxurious room like this would cost. To add to his confusion, a hologram similar to a system window from video games appeared in front of his eyes, welcoming him to the magical continent of Eldera. Just having woken up, his mind was a bit slow, and he took a while to realize he couldn't move his body. When he looked to the side, he saw a strange young man looking back at him in confusion. He wondered what was happening and why he looked like this. A week later, he had already adjusted to his situation. His maid entered the room and informed him that his tea was ready, and he casually thanked Leia. After about a week, he understood his new position. He had died and become this man named Rhine Edgar. This young master was the third son of the Grand Duke of Calfaria, Dagar. He had a brother and a sister, and this new life of his wasn't bad. His two siblings loved him dearly and spoiled him, the youngest in the family, with various expensive gifts. Even as he entered adolescence, he continued to be pampered by his mother and siblings. His family adored him. Rain was the youngest in the family, cherished by everyone, which seemed like a reward for his terrible previous life. This continent is called Audria, a world where all establishments rely on magic to function. The Caradori Empire is the largest human empire on this continent. Not only human nations exist on this continent, but also those of other races, such as elves and dwarves. The Dagar family is a noble family, with a territory of about 300,000 square kilometers and approximately 1 million subjects. As a noble, the protagonist not only has fine clothes, but also a personal maid to serve him. He believed that living such a happy life must be the result of all the hard work in his past life. Interrupting his thoughts, A informed him that there was something to discuss with his master and asked him to follow her. Meanwhile, in the office of the head of the family, a butler informed his lord that the young Master Rhine had arrived and received orders to let him in. Entering the office, Rhine greeted his father, who asked if his son knew why he had called him. The young master replied that he didn't know. As his youngest son was unaware, he explained that his son had reached the age to administer his own territory and asked if he had decided where he wanted to govern. Naturally, Rain was surprised by this news. Seeing his son's lack of knowledge, the head of the family placed his hand on his forehead and sighed. He then walked towards the map, revealing that the territory his son would govern in the future was in the northwest. Although relatively safe due to a shortage of magicians, the issue of food production had been difficult to solve. Although his family's territory was currently secure, the future of the Caradori Empire was not so optimistic. Indeed, his father's words were very true. The royal family of the Caradori Empire was in decline, with widespread political corruption, and there were countless open and hidden conflicts between the various lords of the empire. In this world, after his reincarnation, he experienced care and concern like never before, so he didn't want to lose the people who cared about him. Seeing his son's serious expression, the Grand Duke worried he was pressuring his youngest too much. Out of concern, he told his son not to feel so pressured, assuring him that his older brother, sister, and he, his father, would help him if any problems arose. But to his surprise, Rain asked his father if the security of the territory would improve if the food issue was resolved. The Grand Duke replied that food problems could not be solved with enthusiasm alone. His son needed to take one step at a time. Although happy with his son's enthusiasm, he thought to himself that the youngest still saw the problem too simply, like a child. But what he didn't know was that Rain was not relying on mere passion, but on the wisdom of centuries of the human industrial revolution. With great confidence, he told his father to leave the food issue to him. The city of Isling, the westernmost land in the Grand Duchy of Aldari, borders enemy territory Sorema to the north, the Elves' land to the west, and the vast ocean to the south. Due to its location at the intersection of three nations, the city of Isling is often engulfed in the flames of war. The frequent wars left once fertile land barren, and the population declined, with people barely surviving. So, the prerequisite for an industrial revolution is a large, talented workforce. Rain knew he needed to find a way to increase the population. Normally, this would be an extremely difficult task. He would have to take many risks to obtain potential serfs, making it a gamble. But it seemed he wouldn't have to risk much, as this time fate appeared to be on his side. He acquired something surprising from the system, a skill that allowed him to scan a person. With this ability, he could clearly observe the statistics of the person being scanned. Testing it on his family, he gained a rough understanding of the people in this world. It seems his top priority upon reaching his territory is to recruit talented individuals. However, the protagonist didn't know there was a small problem. His father asked Leia to keep an eye on him to ensure he didn't cause any trouble in the territory. Her mission was to make sure the young lord didn't create problems. Later, in the city of Isling, at the mansion of the city lord, the old butler informed his master that the youngest son of the Grand Duke would arrive in the city today and asked if they should act first. There were rumors that the Grand Duke Aldari not only adored his youngest son, but even his brother and sister cherished him. Contrary to his expectations, the mysterious man said they would delay any action and await further instructions from the master. A young noble and spoiled master like him would not understand financial and tax records. When the young master arrives, they should just give him some random accounts to confuse him. Based on the time, the young master should arrive soon, so his servant should greet him. After saying this, he thought to himself that now was the time for Aldari to pay for his crimes. Reaching his destination, Rin thought in his mind that, as he had expected, due to the lack of population, the once cultivated land had become desolate. Then he asked Leia to show the map of this area. If he could dredge the river to the west and build a canal connecting it to the southern seaport, it would facilitate his future work. While he was thinking about this, he was interrupted by a female voice pleading with her father to stop gambling. That money was meant for her mother's treatment. But despite her pleas, the scoundrel ignored his daughter and tried to take the money by force to gamble again, lying that this time he would definitely win. But the girl didn't want to hand it over, saying it was for her mother's treatment. Losing patience, the scoundrel said that if she didn't give him the money, he would hit her. When he was about to slap his daughter, the young master clenched his fists and punched the scoundrel, sending him flying away. Despite his cool move, his hand was swollen, and he complained about the pain. Concerned, the maid said that if her young master planned to hit someone next time, he should inform her in advance so she could prepare his protective gear. He commented that it was an impulsive act. She wouldn't have had time to prepare anyway. Then he asked her to check the girl's condition. He would go talk to that trash. Standing in front of the scum, Rin asked what kind of scum he was. He wanted to use the money that could save his wife to gamble, and even tried to hit his daughter. Terrified, the scoundrel asked who the protagonist was, and Rin, crouching down, whispered in his ear that who he was didn't matter. What mattered was that if he found out that scum like him had gone to the casino again, he would have someone cut off his head. Scared to death, the trash fled, saying he would never do it again, that he would never gamble again. Turning to the girl, Rin asked if she was okay, and in his mind he decided to check her physical state with the system. With tears in her eyes, she thanked him for his help. If the money for her mother's treatment had been taken, she wouldn't know what to do. Analyzing her status, he was surprised. Although her stats weren't high, this girl had a naturally sacred body for agriculture. He should recruit her as she would be vital for future agriculture. So, without wasting time, he said that since she was going to the city to find a doctor for her mother, she should take his carriage. They were also heading to the city. Not wanting to trouble her savior, she declined his offer, saying she was too dirty and would soil his carriage. But with a warm expression, he said it was just a few planks of wood put together to form a means of transport. Cleanliness didn't matter. Besides, he wanted to ask something. With such severe poverty, how was there a casino around here? Last autumn, the great duke of the enemy country Soren attacked the city, causing the death of many soldiers. This spring, a great flood destroyed much of the land and crops. The citizens' lives became a living hell, and even finding a meal became difficult. So he needed to conduct a census to know how many productive forces they had. He would first go to the Lord's estate in Isling City to see how much money was available to use as development funds. Turning to Lilia, he asked if she knew where the Lord's property was located. When she was about to answer, an arrogant noble on horseback appeared, causing disorder and seeming unconcerned with the peasants' lives. Seeing him heading in their direction, the maid jumped in front of her master, protecting him from being run over, and gave their enemy a cold stare. Unable to breathe, The protagonist asked her to let go. He couldn't breathe. Full of concern, she asked if her master was hurt or felt pain anywhere, and he replied that thanks to Leia, he was fine. Then he asked if Lilia knew who that was, and she replied that the man was the young master of the Edwin family. All the casinos in Aslan City belonged to his family. Hearing this, the protagonist was sure they were wealthy, which was great. He had been worried about where to get development funds. Excited, he asked Lilia to take him to the casino. Concerned, she said they shouldn't go there. If he went, all his money would be taken by the casino. Reassuring her, he told her not to worry. The casino couldn't beat him. Seeing his confidence, she wondered how powerful this young master really was. A bit later, at the casino entrance, Rin excitedly thought to himself that he couldn't wait to take down this place with his industrialized production line. Entering the casino, he saw people losing money, borrowing money, and even a young man winning a big pot. This scene made him think that as long as casinos existed, people would never work properly. Interrupting his thoughts, Leia whispered in his ear that soldiers were already surrounding the casino and asked if he wanted to act now. He replied that they should wait for the big fish first. At the same time, an employee asked if he would like to play, and he replied that he wasn't very good at that kind of thing. He wanted something easy, and the happy employee asked him to follow, taking him to a table and explaining that these 2 tokens were on the house. He could try his luck. Taking the tokens, the protagonist decided to participate in the game and tossed them on the table. Seeing this, the 2 employees grinned wickedly and exclaimed that he got 466. That was a big win. The game they were playing was called Sick Bow, a popular East Asian casino game. Depending on the total sum of the dice, it would be considered small or large, with equal chances for both. Not wasting any time, the green-haired employee commented that it was a pity his master almost won, and the protagonist said that if that was all, it wasn't very fun, calling the girls to go to a restaurant because he was hungry. But before he could move, the green-haired employee stepped in front of him and said the young master could only leave after paying the money he owed them. Rin, with a relaxed expression, asked where the idiot got the idea that he owed anything, and the employee shamelessly replied that the young master had borrowed these 2 tokens and had to pay the money back first. Arguing, the protagonist said the employee had just claimed they were house chips. Of course, the little thief exclaimed that the young man must be joking. Nothing is free in this place. Each chip is worth 100 gold coins, but with service fees and interest, the young man owed 250 gold coins. If he didn't bring enough money today, he could also leave his servant girl there. Interjecting, Lillian told him to stop lying and warned her master not to believe him. Each chip was only worth 1 silver coin. He was lying about everything. Naturally, the employee got angry and asked where this bastard came from and how she dared ruin his plans, calling someone to throw her out of that place. Losing patience, the protagonist threw a punch at his enemy's face, sending him flying far away and asking who allowed him to speak. The bystanders, seeing the chips on the ground, began to fight over them. Seeing this, the protagonist thought to himself that these people had no hope. At the same time, the arrogant noble from before appeared, asking who dared mess with his casino. Seeing the big fish finally arriving, the protagonist got excited. Seeing the addicts stealing the chips, the arrogant noble ordered his servants to defeat them and teach those customers their place. Following his order, the guards began beating the addicts, and even though they begged for their lives and claimed to have learned their lesson, the guards didn't stop. This scene left the bystanders terrified. Taking advantage of the fact that they had learned not to mess with his casino, he shouted that everyone must behave, or this would happen to them. Even Lillian was terrified by this scene and began blaming herself for everything. If she hadn't brought them to a place like that, they wouldn't have been deceived. The kind young master even asked the doctor to save her mother and paid for the treatment himself, so she couldn't let him take all the blame. She had to pay the big brother back. Therefore, she stepped forward and shouted that she wouldn't let him deceive her big brother. Confused, the bystanders wondered whose daughter this girl was. She was doomed. In Isling City, no one who challenged Verlo had a good end. Annoyed, the arrogant noble asked if she had something to say, and she said his casino had deceived everyone and destroyed numerous families. She wouldn't let him intimidate her elder brother and sister, as they were good people. Not liking how a mere commoner was referring to him, the arrogant noble moved toward her. Seeing his hand approaching her face, Lillian closed her eyes. She was prepared to be punished in place of her big brother. But no matter how much she waited, her face was not hit. Confused, she opened her eyes and saw her big brother holding the arrogant noble's hand. Analyzing his status, the protagonist saw that his attributes weren't too bad, but his loyalty score was terrible. Only 5. This Eldrin family could start a rebellion at any time. He had to be careful. Realizing that the protagonist was not an ordinary person, he asked if the king also didn't like his ways. The protagonist replied that, in fact, he liked his ways a lot. Only the strong survive in this world. Whoever wins the fight has the last laugh. Smiling, the noble asked if the young man would still go against him, and if the brat didn't know who he was. With a serious expression, he replied that he didn't need to know who the young man was. He only needed to know one thing. Before finishing his sentence, he clapped his hands, and with his signal, soldiers entered the casino, and he continued what he was saying. He had won the fight now, so he would have the last laugh. His words were the law. Meanwhile, at a noble banquet, a certain noble remarked that he hoped the Master King would like his daughter, and mentioned hearing that the noble beside him had recently earned more money. The charming man exclaimed it was all thanks to the lord of the city. Thinking to himself, the noble wondered if the old man's plan was indeed to marry the Grand Duke's son to his daughter, and asked his friend to scare them a little at the banquet tonight. He thought the nobles were naive for thinking they could carry out their plans. This noble was so charismatic that even the beautiful noblewomen flirted with him, but they didn't know it was all just a mask. The only thing he cared about at that moment was where that boy, Verlo, had gone. If he were there, they could establish a relationship with the Grand Duke's son and gain some benefits. He couldn't trust that garbage city lord too much. While thinking about this, he heard the guards shouting that His Highness Reigned Garch had arrived. With the protagonist's arrival, the nobles gathered around him, saying they were the head of the Raven family and had bought some gifts for him today. Another noble said he was the head of the Houster family and had brought his daughter and asked him to take a look. Ignoring their offers, he said if everyone was already here, they should begin. The moment he said this, his servants carried a painting and placed it in the middle of the room. While everyone looked confused, R explained that this was the project he had designed that afternoon, a dam. They would ensure it was feasible during its construction. Increasing their confusion, the nobles asked what a dam was. Noticing their confusion, he told them not to worry. He would explain with the law. Handing them the map, he explained that he had looked at Isling City's geographic location that afternoon. There was a major flood every year due to a river north of the city. If they built a dam there, they could stop the floods during rainy seasons and water their crops during droughts. Surprised, the noble thought to himself that it was an excellent idea. If they really could build this dam, Isling City's agricultural production would be greatly improved. It seemed the Grand Duke's son was no ordinary boy, but unlike him, the old bald man didn't understand his plan and asked what it had to do with them, to which he replied he needed money. Construction work required money. Not wanting to spend their gold, they commented they were also poor. With their refusals to participate in the construction, the noble thought in his mind that although the young man was smart, he was also very naive. He wanted these vampires to fund his idea. It would never work. But what he didn't know was that the protagonist had already expected this. He told them not to claim they were poor. He had a good way to make money and would share it now. He raided a casino that afternoon and took about 50,000 gold coins from it. He then asked the elders how many other casinos there were in Isling City. Hearing that he raided a casino, the old men were surprised. This meant they wouldn't receive any shares this month and wondered which casino he raided, hoping it wasn't the one they had invested in. But all the casinos in Isling City were run by Master Adrian. They believed that the young master would be in trouble. Looking at the young man, Adrian called him an idiot. If he simply stayed still, he probably wouldn't have done anything to the young man. But since the brat chose to fight, he would destroy him. Approaching him, Adrian said that the Master King's actions of raiding the casino violated the laws of the Cardorial nation. He must not break the nation's laws. All the bystanders agreed with the noble, saying these casinos were legal businesses. He couldn't raid them just because he wanted to. Seeing everyone turn against the Grand Duke's son, Adrian thought to himself that the young master was very naive. He didn't know how to control people without caring about their criticisms. But he knows everything about their involvement with the casinos. He will give Andre one last chance. Either he gives up now, or he will be destroyed. Despite his threat, the noble wondered if the Grand Duke will easily forgive his son when he finds out about his actions, seeing the old folks doing everything to not lose their money. R asked if Adrian wants to talk about the law. If that's the case, then that's great, with a smile on his face. He ordered his soldiers to capture all of them. He will talk about the law with them today.